Yeah, hi everyone. This is AutoML training committee meeting on 20th of September. I think we can start our call with introduction. I can get started. I'm Andre. I'm AutoML training working group co-chair, mainly hosting these committee meetings and try to maintain several components of Kubeflow. Yeah, do we have anything else who just want to introduce himself?
Yep, maybe I go next. So my name is Rob, and I'm working for a big automotive company in Germany, and we are actually making use of some components of Kubeflow, namely speaking the training operator, and have a few questions over here, and probably also one or another improvement that we'd like to discuss and share with you.
Yeah, it will be nice. Nice to meet you, Rob. So for how long are you using the training operator so far, or you just get started?
For me personally, we only get started more or less.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah, we can just continue discussion during the call. And to anyone else?
Sishan, you're mute.
Yeah, we can hear you, Sishan.
It's on the far left bottom.
Yeah.
Far left side on the bottom. The mute button, at least for me with the web client.
Yeah, I think I also asked you to unmute, so you can't see the button on the top right. See.
Now you're on mute.
Yeah, now we can hear you. Oh, still no sound. Strange. Yeah, I think now we can hear you, Sishan. Oh, you can't hear us. I see. Yeah, maybe try to log into the Zoom. Maybe like it actually will help you. Maybe let me just message you. Yeah, nice to meet you, Zishan. I guess like you're just a colleague of Rob, and like yes, we can just discuss things. And let me just message you. Maybe like your login could help us. Yeah, great. All right. So I think maybe like before we jump to the training cooperative discussion, I can quickly share what we have today. So we're still like in the phase of releasing 1.8 of Kubeflow, right? So we kind of like make the first RC and the manifest testing almost finished. So I think right now we are waiting until distributions can start their testing and just to identify bugs. So far we didn't see any issues with the training operator or Katib in 1.8. So I really hope that like distribution testing will start soon, because it takes time for distribution to actually spin up the manifest and do the deployment. So yeah, like so far, if you see any problems or issues, please let us know in advance, because like we need to cut the RC, and if there are any kind of problems, we need to do it before we actually make the official release of Kubeflow. Yeah, so I think like also like I want to mention that we're still looking to have a summit of Kubeflow in November. Oh, it's actually in October, so it will be like in October 6th. And basically this is, let me just share my screen so I can show you. Yeah, so this is like we're trying to partnering with KCD Texas event, and this is this is like not only like in-person event, but also it will be an ability to join this event virtually. But we're really like looking for more kind of like sponsors. Um, yeah, Zashni, if you're speaking, we can actually hear you. Can you hear us? Yeah, all right. So yeah, I think like as I mentioned, like if you have any questions, please like let me know. I can help you. But basically, like these folks that are really like looking for the sponsors and for people who can attend. Basically, this is just a one-day event which happening like in Irving in October 6th. And from my understanding, that also will be a possibility to join this event virtually. So Amber from the project management team like Kubeflow is trying to help us to like create a virtual bridge for folks to join. So let me post the link in our notes, and please, if you can, just join, just try to support the community and try to take tickets, because it's like very important for us to, like to have a summit at least once a year, so where we can like come together and speak about like the future of the project, especially like establishing a roadmap. And currently, like we're in the phasing of migrating to CNCF, to incubating project, and there are like a lot of things which needs to be changed. Like for example, like steering committee, oversight committee, technical steering committee, election process, and all the things will be discussed during this summit. So I'm strongly suggest for any one of you, like if you're interested in Kubeflow in general, like join us during this call. And also, I think like I just want to mention a few things about like the community. So recently we created like few PRs that important for the whole kind of people who are interested in Kubeflow to take a look. So the first one is steering committee election proposal. So this is like the proposal for how the steering committee will be elected. And I think like we're planning to have a first election on this year before December. And if anyone like in the committee interesting, like just to want to see how the government structure will look like for the Kubeflow, please take a look at this proposal, and also the KC charter. So basically, this is the charter for Kubeflow steering committee. Like what are their responsibilities, what kind of meetings they're gonna have, uh, what kind of like power they have to control the roadmaps. So please take a look at these two PRs. And if you have any questions, like we are open to any questions, even like for the new community members. If you have any suggestions or objections, please let us know. And this is like very important for us to move forward and to like build a healthy community. And so let me just maybe post the PRs here as well. So KCC, KCS election process. Yes. So because like for us, like it's very important to have like the open kind of government structure and an ability that anyone who are actually active in the community can participate in the future health of the product. So yeah, I think like please take a look at this. Please help us with the summit. If you have anyone who can help us to sponsor the summit, because we're still looking for a few sponsors, and we have like I think 24 hours for sponsors to apply. So if you have anyone who is interesting to sponsor us, please let me know, and I can contact you with appropriate folks who actually organizing these events. All right, so yeah, before we like move on to training cooperative discussion, I just want to quickly mention about the fate. So I don't see anyone here on the call from the fate fate operator repo, but basically, so let me maybe open this again. So we previously have this like a little bit of context, like we have this kind of fate operator repository in Kubeflow.org. And this is basically like the training operator for federated learning, who actually like helps to run like Fate on Kubernetes. And I know like this project was not like heavily developed for the last like for a couple of years, and we have like the proposal to actually archiving this repo. But before archiving this, since like as I mentioned before, Kubeflow doesn't have any story around like federated AI, and I think there is a possibility of collaboration between like different organizations. I would say we need to have these folks attending this like call. Maybe like I can pick them again, and just have a discussion on what we can do next with the fate, because there are still kind of like pending issue what we can do here. Yeah, and just I guess like these guys, they also have the project called Cube Fate, which has been like developing currently. So just wanna learn like more about like do they want to have any collaboration with the Kubeflow components, or they would just want to move forward by themselves. So yeah, let's maybe have a conversation next week. All right, so Robert, like for your PR and discussion, like do you want to like maybe give a quick overview what exactly we need to discuss?
Yes, I can do so. So yes, as I mentioned, we are planning or we want to use the training operator provided by Kubeflow. particularly for MPI jobs.
Okay.
And we are running the training operator inside a cloud provider,
Okay.
GK, in the cloud provider Kubernetes cluster.
Okay.
And we have basically bound certain permissions to the server to a service account that we need to use.
Okay.
And they need so actually it's about a storage bucket, and we need to access that storage bucket within the service account. And how the whole story started is that we actually have the issue that the service account gets overwritten, that the service account that we provide with the MPI job specification that gets for the launcher gets overwritten by a custom service account that's being created on the fly by the MPI job training operator. I've just tried to not to confuse, because there is a MPI operator that's a separate GitHub repository. And I'm not talking about that one, but about the MPI job, or MPI job that's being included in the training operator.
Makes
Yes,
sense.
and that's being overwritten. And I provided a fix originally, which is now it's actually after your good input from yesterday, or from several people yesterday, I also understood, okay, the original way how I thought we can solve it is not going to work, and instead provided a different suggestion on how to fix it. That way, if we don't provide a service account in the specification of the MPI job, then it will create one and provide the appropriate permissions. If it's there, it's not going to happen. If it's provided, then that's not going to happen. And basically, it relies on that everything's being correctly created for the service account, which might be a good compromise, I hope. And in terms of all that, of this whole pull request, which is now open for like 2 weeks, I think, I found, and that's basically the bigger point here. I
Yeah.
found out that the integration tests somehow now here they work. Somehow they behave very, very weird, because I prepared them to run locally, and they worked fine. And just running in the GitHub Actions CI pipeline, they didn't work. And actually, maybe to also give an idea on how to make the problems more transparent, maybe it would be good, because currently those integration tests, they just schedule a job in Kubernetes, and then they check regularly if the job has completed. If it didn't complete in time, or if it failed to run, then then the test will fail. But basically, it would be very good if there would be some insight what's actually happening inside the Kubernetes pod
Yeah. That
that's
makes
being started for the test. So to get an idea what's actually going wrong, that was actually very confusing. Also, it seemed like that there's a certain Go test that also does some kind of integration testing. That also was kind of flaky. Sometimes it was working fine, sometimes it didn't.
Yep.
And yeah, in general, it seemed like that there were problems with timeouts. At least I was experiencing them running locally. So also there, the suggestion, if it maybe makes sense to run computations that don't need that much time, maybe just half a minute or something instead of, because sometimes they can run for quite a long time if you don't have too much power locally available.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, so there are like two separate problems. So in terms of like MPI, let me just maybe first like cover this thing. So yeah, you're right. Like we have currently there is an open like kind of issue. We have two versions of MPI operator. We have MPI v1, merged inside training operator, and we have MPI v2, which is kind of like separate from training operator. We're trying to, and there is like an open discussion, and I try to post it here, like what we should do with MPI operator. like should we deprecate the V1 completely and move forward with V2 because V2 is much more stable, it's have like much less latency because it doesn't use kubectl exec, and basically it proves that for HPC, for example, for high performance computing, it's much more robust compared to the version of V1.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is like, since it kind of like cannot just be merged inside training operator, and the question is like why it can be merged, this is separate. We try to separate these things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the long-term vision, and we need to have discussion around this, like V1 will be deprecated and all the customers will just use V2 in the long term. So if you're heavily used of MPI operator, just please take a look what is the differences, and especially if you're like a user, right? Like you can let us know, like, is there any limitations from your side to use like V2 compared to V1? And what are the problems you see there, right? Um, so yeah, that would be really nice to hear from actually users of MPI, what they have. Because previously I remember we've been discussing many users actually still using V1 and they have the production jobs that they cannot just migrate to the V2. And that is why we have to support like these two versions for quite some time, right?
Yeah, also can provide there some feedback, since actually
Mm.
that's getting the actual MPI job or CRD,
Mm-hmm.
training operator MPI job, is being created by a third party
Mm-hmm.
application, and also that's also why we can't just quickly switch over to the version 2,
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see.
because the third party application also needs to change before that's possible. I mean, they're pretty agile and fast for change requests, but still.
That makes sense. So basically, like you depends on this third-party application, right?
Yeah.
To run your API jobs.
Yes.
I see. Uh, yeah. Yeah, I think like maybe we need to basically invite maybe you and Aldo and other folks like who actually developing the MPI heavily, and just to see what we can do for the long term, because like if we like like if we all agree that V2 is the future version of MPI, we need to invest maybe some time in the next release to like to deprecate the first version of MPI. But just we need to understand will be the impact for the all users, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I will try to, let me just post it here. So yeah, I think we can probably start this discussion of MPI. And so in terms of the jobs, so can you can you give us like maybe a little bit of more like insight? So what kind of jobs you're running on MPI? Is it related to machine learning or
Yes.
something? Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's for machine learning again. It's basically myself. I'm not, because we're quite a big organization. Myself, I'm not actually creating the productive MPI jobs itself. Just make sure that the infrastructure is there.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, I just ran I tested only with the provided example jobs.
I see.
Yeah, that's what I can tell about it. But again, that's what I know is this MPI jobs are actually being used by learning learning tasks that we
Mm-hmm.
ourselves also don't have 100% under our control, because they are supplied again by a
Mm-hmm.
third party.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, all pretty complicated. It's not the beautiful vanilla use case
Yeah.
that we all want to have, but it's like real world complicated, unfortunately.
It makes sense. And like in terms of the examples, so I know there are like several examples using like Horowat, for example, or using, I believe, what is it like the um yeah, I think this is using Horowat, some of the examples using API run. So what kind of like specific things you have in your like environment to run these examples? Um like what kind of like this distributed like machinery behind the scenes you're using?
So basically, we also, for the example that we run, and for what we want to use, we also run Horowat.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, that's from the software side.
Makes sense.
And particularly, yeah, I think it's allowed to be told. We're using Google Cloud,
Mm-hmm.
and they relying on the integration with many of the cloud services, like for example GCS for storing data there and then reading it within the machine learning jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and not being dependent to supply
Mm-hmm.
credentials inside the Docker container that we use for the learning, but instead using the service account that we can just attach onto
Yeah.
the container. It would really be a big help if we
Yeah,
can
yeah. So yeah,
make
you
use of that.
basically yeah. So you know like more kind of integration on RBAC side of things, right? To attach your internal like capabilities, right? Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so going back to like your PR, so I guess like the main idea of the new one, just if the service account is specified in a launcher, like right, we're just going to reuse it, and the RBAC will be managed by operator, like the role binding and the role itself, right, which
Yeah,
needs complete access. But we're just going to reuse this SA uh, from the launcher, right, if it is specified.
yeah.
Uh,
If it's specified, we're going to use that. We're going to create it
mhm.
if it's not already there,
Yeah.
and it just yeah provides some more flexibility, a
Yeah,
little bit more flexibility.
yeah, I will definitely take a look. So I will also like try to ping like Aldo and Yuki and other folks who actually developing an API operator. Maybe they have any like thoughts on this. Like for example, what if you like for example want to create service account by yourself, by your orchestration, right?
Mhm.
You want to attach some additional roles, right? So maybe it needs to have some more, but maybe it's like for the following PRs, right? Because right now you just need to attach your SA, right? And SA creation, from my understanding, it's fine, right? That they say it's creation, it's up to operator, right?
That wouldn't be a big deal. Yes. So speaking for Google Cloud,
Mhm.
when using the GKE, they have two concepts of a service account. So there's the Kubernetes service account,
Yep.
and if that's being, I mean, and the permissions to that service account, they can be provided by easily be provided by the training operator. We just need to provide one certain annotation. So for us, it makes sense if the service account is already there,
Mhm.
because we need to bind it to a so-called, they also call it service account in GCP, which
Yep.
is basically an identity which you can provide role permissions to, that runs on your machines or in GKE, and where you combine permissions to, and you can tell, okay, if for example the pod is running with the service account, it can read the certain GCS buckets.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
I
Mhm.
think the way how we have it, it's fine.
So yeah, I think you're right. So it's like similar to like AWS Iris, right? Like AM roles for service account, right?
Yeah,
When you
yeah, exactly.
access to S3, you just need, but this annotation, you still need to specify this annotation. So how you're planning to add the annotation to existing service account then?
Yes. So the way we would use it is, I mean, we would, if we supply the service account, then I already assume that it is already existing. So we make sure beforehand, because we will not use like a throwaway service. I mean, in the current training operator, kind of throwaway service account is being created.
Hmm.
And we want to try to avoid that, but instead using not a throwaway service account, but to um, have a like dedicated service account that we beforehand set up and bind to the GCP service account. And that way we are already fine. So currently there is in the code itself, and I didn't touch that, there is already a check if the service account is existing. If it's not existing, it's not going to be created.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So basically, yeah, I think you're right. So basically, this new launch service account is like basically executes only if the service account is
Yeah.
not right. Yeah, I think that's right. So basically, like we're assuming that if the service account is set, and if it is created, the orchestrator will not create a new one, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, if it is only not found. Yeah, I think that should work.
So I would say it's an extension to the currently existing
Mhm.
way of how a service account is being handled.
Yeah, you're right. And they're all
So
by yeah.
so that wouldn't break. So for somebody who doesn't provide a service account, it wouldn't break their implementation. There's no change. It's only for those guys who explicitly provide one in the MPI job spec. And yeah, they can then benefit from it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that looks good to me. So I will just try to ping these folks from MPI side of things and just to give them the context so they can just approve it. And I think it's give like more flexibility. I guess like
I,
from the worker side, like we only attaching the service account to the launcher, right?
mm,
Yeah, the workers they don't have any kind of like they don't require to have any permissions.
Not
Yeah.
really, no. I was previously applying the changes locally and built a local version and uploaded that to
Right.
our
Docker.
Docker registry and ran it on one of our clusters, and that just worked fine.
Right.
So I'm also pretty certain, anyways, that the service account's not being, if it's provided, it's not being overwritten for the workers.
Yeah.
It's only for the launcher.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. All right, sounds good. Yeah, thank you for this. So, John, just to give you a little bit of context. So, I don't know if you're following the PRs, but the MPI has a problem that some of the users they cannot set their service accounts inside the launcher if they need to have some specific orchestration. Like for example, like giving access to S3 or to GCS or other kind of permission, right? Um, and there is a problem that today the orchestrator, the controller, basically overrides the service account um, with the default one. And this PR gives the flexibility of actually not create the service account if it is set by the user. Um, so basically using the defined service account. Um,
Yeah,
yes.
it makes sense to me. I was just waiting for the other folks to reply, but it looks good to me. I think this is pretty neat. I was also thinking, like, even for the other uh, uh, TF job or the other jobs as well, like we have the same problem there, right?
So no, like this, they're all only required for MPI, like for TF job or XGBoost, right? We don't
No,
create.
I'm saying, like, for example, if you actually add service account in the other ones, what I'm thinking, like, what would be the behavior there?
So we have similar problems internal. Like, and what we try to do, we try to like create a service account on the fly with appropriate permission. Because like if we don't have any like flexibility in orchestrator to like pre-create some, because TF job doesn't require any RBAC. Does make sense? First of all, right? So PyTorch job doesn't require any RBAC.
No. So one second. So yes, I'm not talking about the MPI job. Yeah, this one makes sense. I'm just saying for the TF job, how do you handle this?
So if users needs to create like a service account, and like roles or like needs to have access to S3, they need to create all these kind of Kubernetes resources by themselves.
Yeah,
And
and then add the corresponding service account.
yes,
Like
in the container spec, in the pod spec, yeah, that's right.
perfect. Okay, yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to add additional like integration. For example, like in AWS, there is an option to access like S3 via like annotation, similar to GCS. The question is like, do we want to like handle this inside our APIs? Like for example, we can say that if user set the S3 path inside the API spec of TF job, then like our orchestrator will create the service account with appropriate
Yeah.
annotation.
I was referring to that. That's not automatic for the other ones, right? But again, I think we can. It's not. I think the KSov has a service account even outside the spec, I think. From what I remember. But again, they are not allowing the full job, the pod spec, right? And that is one reason that they are keeping outside the models. But here in TF job, we are anyways providing the full job spec. So if you are adding any extra service account, it will be confusing. So we can assume that users create by themselves and then add that in the in the pod spec.
Yeah, but you just need to understand like what is the use case, right? Like if it is just a model, and this is like back to my like separate discussion about fine tuning, but I just want to like see how the training operator could actually can like fetch the model in a more kind of like supported way. Because right now, if users wants to do any kind of integration with the storage or with the model registry, they need to do everything by themselves, right? We don't provide them any kind of like helper.
So what is the ideal behavior that you want to look at?
So for example, like similar to Ksurf, right? In Ksurf, you could specify the storage URI, and the storage URI just the URL or like S3 path or OCI path to your model, right? And during the like when the inference is started, they have the sidecar container which download the model, like the init container, right?
Right.
So we can let's discuss this after we finish the MPI because I just want to have like few ideas and maybe we can have a discussion on this. But for MPI, I think it looks good. So give us like a few more days, Robert.
I checked this one. I think like this is okay. I was just waiting for others to actually comment, but I think this is good to go. In my opinion, I can watch that.
Please take your time to have everyone having
Sure.
a chance to review it. Well, I mean, it's probably just to make sure I didn't build in any twitches.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Just a question from my side because I'm unaware of the release strategy. Because I need to report it back since it's kind of little important to us. Can you give like a look ahead when there will be a release with the changes included into it?
So the good thing that we're publishing images for every kind of pull request.
Okay, cool.
So if you like, we're doing usually releases every like several months, like official releases. But since we're publishing images every commit, you can always take the latest changes from the Docker Hub.
That's cool.
Yeah, but they are not we cannot guarantee that they're stable because we don't like test them end to end, right? We test on like every PR, it's integration test, but they're not like in the bundle of Kubeflow, right? And they don't have a specific tag, but you can always use them.
Okay, nice to know.
Yeah, and let me try to find it. So Docker Hub, I think it's the registry called Kubeflow, if I remember correctly.
Kubeflow /
training operator, right? Yes, and this training operator, as you can see, that has like every commit of after each release, right? So you can just take the latest one. Yeah, so once your image will be published, just please check like these tags and you will find like the training operator commit with your changes.
Amazing, loving it.
So, and also like maybe quickly, so we want to discuss like about our kind of like the test flakiness, right? So there is a problem that we discussed with Robert, like Jonah, like our tests and training operator currently are very hard to debug. And that is why, like, because during the run, we didn't provide any information about what's happening behind the scenes. We only like printing the status information for the jobs. So the one addition that I can imagine, we have the callback function in our SDK. So basically this callback function will execute on every kind of timeout, which basically help us to see what's happening behind the scenes, like maybe checking like the logs or checking describe the pods, right?
You're talking about the integration test?
Yeah. I'm talking about integration test. Yeah.
Okay.
So because right now, if again in the test log, we only say that jobs is being created or jobs has been running. And we need to have some sort of improvements to have some sort of more information about what's happening in the cluster, right? During the test. So I think, Robert, it would be nice if you can just start an issue and we can like provide our ideas there. How
Sure.
to, and I think the callback function could help us here because this callback actually executes on every kind of loop when we're checking the status of the jobs. And we already run this API as part of our end-to-end test. Yeah, so please start an issue and maybe like we can have some information, like ideas around this.
Pleasure.
And maybe quickly, so I think like John, if we want to discuss MPI operator feature for the next call. Because for example, like Robert, he's using like MPI for like for internal usage. Like we want to see like whether V1 or V2 should be our next focus, right?
Good question. So we are at a roadblock, right? Like we can definitely integrate V2, but again, now the problem is people have what would we do with the previous version of V1, right? Like for people who are actually using it. See, ideally, like we have to invest, and also there is some effort required to integrate a V2 also to the training operator, right?
Yep.
So something that we have to take it up. And one other the common argument that comes is MPI operator is not specific to training, right? Like, so that's one reason that people want to have MPI operator separate from training operator so that they can use it for other jobs. So it's a mixed signal from people. So that's why like we couldn't decide what is the right thing to do.
Yeah. So I guess the question is like, is it because like the training operator creates additional kind of compute cost to run this?
Yeah, not exactly, but again, I think they don't. For example, if something is under training operator, it is all connected with ML, right? They, while for normal MPI job, it is not specifically with training. It can be with any parallel jobs, right? So that's why they want to make that idea distinct, right? Like that it is not specific to ML, but again for non-ML jobs as well, which actually needs MPI.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I mean, of course, like we can like maintain this component as a separate kind of controller, right? And
But the argument for getting into this, it's like right now it's very the same effort we could have actually done together and made V2 also better, right? Inside training operator, because it will be single code base and essentially it will become the training operator will become better. So like there is pros and cons either side, and that is where we just got into a roadblock. What is the right thing to do?
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I just want to hear more why why they do not like install the training operator and run API v2 there. Like what is exact problems? I mean, if it's just some engineering problem, or if it's just because they want to run ML like
yeah, like more than someone who's installing it, like their idea is it is being, this is not specific to training, right?
yeah, I understand.
So that's the main thing. And also, for example, someone who's not in training ML, why do they need to actually have controllers for the other MBA other ML jobs? Because we start all by default, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, of course, like like we can always, like as I mentioned, create maintain API under training operator, but just create the two separate controllers, right? Like two separate images, right, and run them. Like, and for people who just want to use API, we can create an overlay which only install API, right? Or we can have an overlay which install everything, API plus training operator, right? Like if it's just about the maintenance, we can always maintain API under training operator. Yeah, but I mean, I think we just need to understand what will be like the easier approach to maintain these things, right? And who is actually going to develop.
For example, if we let me talk to Yuki also once again. So if we are okay in integrating, like I remember he was kind of like is it really required, right? Because MPI is something common and not with training. So if it is required, like I'll try if I can get someone to actually work on it to integrate, or like some effort to be put in there, like to integrate them. So that's something that we are. But again, decision has to be there, which will help. So let me because the other thread in MPI operator itself is like too big, right? And we still haven't got to the final state there yet.
What do you mean? What do you mean by too big?
Like,
Like,
do you have like there's a thread which is created in MPI operator, right? Like regarding
no,
transition
yeah,
back to training operator. So we haven't still. Is this the one? There is something in MPI operator. No, this is the newer one.
mm,
There is something which is created in the MPI operator repository. No, not this. In MPI operator, which talked about integrating it, right? Yeah,
mhm.
anyways, yeah, let's take that offline and I'll try to sync it. What is the right thing?
Right. Yeah. And do you see the problems that if training operator won't have API under the hood and only like we're going to have a separate controller, like as the to running API jobs in Kubeflow? Like, do you see any problems with this?
You mean to take out V1 as well?
Yeah, to take out like API completely from training operator and just run it separate.
I'm saying right. I'm saying like then there are current users. See, I think the reason that we didn't integrate it to training operator V2 to training operator initially was there's a claim that like there are many users, right? Like which are currently using V1
Mhm.
and they don't want to migrate to V2 because V2 was not stable there. So I'm assuming that there are many who are actually using training operator right now with V1. So we have to ensure that when we move out, it has to like it should not be disturbed.
Mhm. I mean, we need to like collect this kind of feedback from users. Like for example, like from you, Robert. Like as I mentioned, it would be nice if you give us feedback about MPI from other folks, like who are actually using MPI. We need to like understand what are their kind of user stories, right? So, Juno, do you have any ideas like how we can collect these user stories, like and just to make a decision, yeah, like with MPI? We can of course like create an issue and ask them to comment, but any of your suggestions?
Let me create a Slack channel and then we'll
Okay,
uh,
okay,
yeah. I'll try to sync offline with all.
okay.
I'll create a group Slack channel. Let's see.
Sounds good. All right, and so maybe just quickly, yeah, about like fine tuning. I know like there is a like a lot of things happening around like large models, and so I guess like the fine tuning thing, and we don't have any kind of out of the box support to have an ability to like to continue to train to already like created models in Kubeflow.
That's a
I was
good point. And
yeah.
like what we have to see, I think what you said earlier, right? So that is very right because we have a very common abstraction, which is very generic. So yeah, so it is useful for certain set of people who can start using the lower abstractions and start creating any job, right? But again, for other users, it will be helpful if we can be a bit more specific and then direct integration, right? Like that will be really helpful. So I think we haven't catered to that particular crowd yet.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of ideas what kind of integration we have? So one like one thing that I was interesting about like Ksurf, like recently it was a PR under Ksurf and I was participating in their kind of discussion around OCR registry. So and let me share some ideas. So they have like the idea of kind of like model car, but which basically instead of using S3, using the Docker registry to download the model. So the thing is like with fine tuning, right? You have the ready model, right, which is stored somewhere like in artifact storage, and basically you want to like additionally train this model on the new data. So what kind of integrations we could have? We can give users an API which basically downloads the model from some sort of the storage, whether it is S3, whether it is like OCI, like some Docker registry or GCS, right? And then like inside the like actual training code, we do additional training for this model. So similar to what KSR are doing with their kind of storage initializer or like model cars as a sidecar, and then you to download the model. We can have the sidecar for training and try and start inside training operator to actually download the model and share this model to the actual training script. The question is like, would it be actually simplify the life for the user because they can always have this integration inside the training script? And I probably need to collect more kind of, like user stories around how they using the fine tuning today, right? Like
So yeah, a couple of thoughts, right? One, yes, definitely like downloading models can be in container, yes. But again, that doesn't solve our problem, right? I'm saying that is just one part of it. If you see, we can download models from Hugging Face or like whatever it is in a single line, right? I'm saying that is not. But the real question is after that, post that fine tuning part, right? Again, that's also something not trivial, right? I'm saying, can we do something there as well, which can help, right? I'm saying downloading model is one, but again, after that, what is the next step, right? I'm saying that is also a key factor in making things simpler.
So any of your ideas like how we could simplify this life? Like Training Operator was designed to run distributed jobs, right? Like we have some integration with queuing, right? With the scheduling, right? With Elastic, PyTorch capabilities. So are there anything else? Like, are there any problems that you see like when people do this fine tuning for their models?
So I think the important thing that we have to figure out is what is the right abstraction for them to start using it, right?
Yeah.
Because if you really see the fine tuning part is there are few techniques and the APIs are kind of standard, right? Given the various data, so the data with the data format, there is some amount of effort required to pre-process that, right? I'm saying that is there. Post that, once it is pre-processed and ready, kept it ready, then the fine tuning part is kind of like standard, right? With different kind of set things around. So that's something that we have to see how can we abstract that out, right? Like to separate things out.
Yeah. So basically have integration with the transformers or something else like you mean?
Yeah, something like that, right? I'm saying that it will be the most helpful part for users if you really want to make it that easy. Else, again, like just downloading mod doesn't really help, in my opinion. I'm saying it will download to a PV. I'm saying that is not for serving. It makes sense, right? Because that's the main thing. Because mod is the main abstraction, right? But for training, that is not the case, right? Like other than model, there are other artifacts as well, right? Like the code is also something very important. See, so the serving part is like, in my opinion, less complex than training. That is because all the abstractions are standard, right? Like when you're given a model, you have certain set of fixed options that you can do with the model, right?
Yep.
While for training, that is not the case, right? Like there are many parameters or tunable things that happens after that. Whether are we actually like going parallelism, kind of like different ways of actually like managing the weight distribution. I'm saying all the different things around, right? Which is not which is difficult to abstract it out, in my opinion, when compared to serving. So serving is not the right example to look at. Yeah, like if you want to compare, in my opinion.
That makes sense. So you think like giving the user an abstraction to download model not actually solving their problems, right?
Yeah, I'm saying it will solve like say 10 or 20% of things, right? But again, that 80% is still remaining, which is if we can actually make that better, I think that then it will really make a change in a training life cycle, right? Like else it is solving some part of it. And but again, for K-serve, that model download actually, in my opinion, that is the main thing, right? Like other than that, I was saying that is constituting 80% of their pain. But
yeah,
that's not the case here.
All right, but I see. But usually today, right, so from my understanding today, they already like, so when they download the model, they're using this kind of like already like the transformers, right, to do the additional fine tuning. And I guess these transformers has already like simple APIs, right? So they're not basically like constructing even like the model layer by layer, right? They already have the ready API that they can use to do the fine tuning. But maybe I'm missing. So from your like experience, like John, like do you see any problems with user facing during the fine tuning specifically? Like any problems that they see?
See, I think there are all the problems are with the model sizes, right? And model size, and whether, for example, like where can we actually fit it in GPU? Like whether what is the parallelism that we want? Other tuning things, right? So earlier, when we were doing like the current training operator architecture is actually good for like non-LLM models, in my opinion, right? I'm saying because like it can basically take a start container, it can start a distributed job, etc., etc. But again, right now we are in a different world by having like a single model cannot fit in a single GPU. Like there are many challenges, right? So what we need is a much better abstraction there in order to fit that out.
And do you think like it might require different distributed techniques, right?
Yes, definitely. I'm saying that's why in the last one we added support for the other parallelism also, right? Like by providing a different definition for rank and the what's that rank.
Yeah, basically given an ability to run like one workload with multiple GPUs, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I see.
But still, these are just concepts for users. If they really want to make things automated in training operator world, it has to work by default, right? Else it is not easy even now because it is not automated.
And by automation, I mean like how they're distributing their kind of training, right?
I'm saying for them, it should be like ideal experience should be this is something that this is the model that we want to take. This is what I want to fine tune, directly done. This is the data that I want to fine tune, and then you start the job. It should start, and say number of replicas or whatever it is, right? Number of GPUs or whatever it is. But again, then it should start ideally.
Yeah, but I think like we still need to have these kind of abstractions for like kind of the whole life cycle of fine tuning, right? Like from the model downloading to data set downloading, right? And giving the like some helpers, right, to the user to not ask them to do everything by themselves, right?
I agree. I'm saying model download is definitely part of that.
Yeah, let me maybe start an issue on this, and I still need to collect some feedback from actually users, and it will be really interesting to understand like how we can simplify life for them, right? Because from my understanding, like the work that I was trying to do with simplification with Python SDK, it kind of like bring users more to our Kubernetes world, right? Because like previously we had the problems that users just don't understand, like data scientists, they don't know about the Docker and YAMLs and Kubernetes, right? And they want to have a simple interfaces, right? Between their code and the Kubernetes clusters, right? And like if we're gonna have this kind of API integration inside training operator API, we can have additional kind of simplification using the Python SDK, right? So just because in an SDK I can say, hey, I have this model, I want to fine tune it, and I have this data set, right? And I maybe just have a link.
I think that is one option that we can try. Like all the abstracted things can be our YAML will still be kind of like low level, but SDK can be high level where we provide just the minimum information and then we populate rest of the things automatically underneath. I think that is a good point. I'm saying we don't need to change anything in the YAML, right? Like YAML is actually for the much more advanced users, while SDK will be the one with all the use cases.
Yeah, but I mean, if we need to require to do changes for some primitives like the sidecars, right, and other parts of Kubernetes, right, like how you actually getting the model, then we need to have changes inside.
Yeah, init container, in my opinion, that is not a big deal. I'm saying like that is pretty straightforward feature. We can definitely.
Yeah. The question, would it be useful, right? And we don't know like yet.
Because in PyTorch operator we are already adding, right? Like it in the PyTorch job.
You mean like the sidecar?
Yeah, like init container.
Yeah, but it's in container just waiting until the.
No, I'm saying that logic is already there, so we can add any more in that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering like if it's actually simplify life for users who do fine tuning in Kubernetes, right? Like, you know, because you were speaking about like different distributed techniques. It is like much more complicated. That's like.
Yeah, I think that is in my opinion, that is the difficult part to how to abstract it, and that is what people that will make much more a better experience for a user than anything else, which we haven't looked at, right? And particularly how do we fine tune it? For example, parallelism, etc. It shouldn't be a headache of user, right? They should just say num GPUs and automatically everything should work, something like that. So.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think like let's continue this discussion. I think maybe like in the next couple of like releases we need to be focused on this training operator, because like we kind of like stay way behind on training operator what we have today, and we kind of like still reusing the existing distributed strategy from PyTorch, TensorFlow, right? XGBoost. We do have like integration, for example, with JAX, right? Which is like much more popular today, right? Also, like I know that Hugging Faces they don't support like I just need to take a look about their distributed model, right? And what we can do additionally there with their transformers, right? But John, if you have any ideas, like, so should we start discussion on a GitHub, you think, and just drop our ideas there? What are your thoughts?
Sure. Let's do that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. And I will also try to collect feedback just to see like how the things could be simplified from the distribution standpoint, and what should be like actually the goal of training operator, right? Yeah, because today is just the way of running this open source distributed strategy on top of Kubernetes, right? But we don't do any additional.
Right now we are in the at least in the documents we are just supporting data parallel, right? I'm saying now it is much bigger than that.
Yeah, but do we need to build like new components for this, right? Like I'm not sure. Like is it the right way of just using the Kubernetes like default primitive? So we need our own distributed, system to run these things, right? So this I'm not sure yet. Right, that might. Yeah, and I know we're over time, so I think like let me start a thread around this, and we can maybe just have a discussion in the next couple of meetings. So yeah, and thank you, Robert, for your time as well. Like I will comment on the issue, and I will try to ping folks so they can review
If they're not replying like in a day, I will get it merged. It looks good to me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really interested to discuss this thing. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. So see you again.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Have a great day. Bye bye.